Good morning, Auroville. This is Abhijit with you again, and I'm back at Auroville Radio with my series on exploring education in arts, animation, and filmmaking. Today, I bring you another episode on animation. In my earlier episodes on animation, I have been covering the 12 principles of character animation. And today, I bring you the fifth. So, the fifth principle of character animation is called follow through and overlapping action. When a character entering a scene reached the spot for his next action, he often came to a sudden and complete stop. This was stiff and did not look natural, but nobody knew what to do about it. They were concerned things don't come to a stop all at once. First, there is one part and then another. Several different ways were eventually found to correct these conditions. They were called either follow through or overlapping action, and no one really knew where one ended and the other began. There seem to be five main categories. The first one, if the character has any appendages, such as long ears or a tail or a big coat, these parts continue to move after the rest of the figure has stopped. This is easy to see in real life. The movement of each must be timed carefully so that it will have the correct feeling of weight, and it must continue to follow through in the pattern of the action in a believable way, no matter how broadly it is cartooned. Second, the body itself does not move all at once, but instead in stretches and catches up, twists, turns, and contracts as the forms work against each other. As one part arrives at the stopping point, others may still be in movement. An arm or a hand may continue its action even after the body is in its pose. In order to put over the attitude clearly, the head, chest, and shoulders must all stop together, since this is the part the audience should see, the part that registers how the character is feeling. Then, a few frames later, the rest of the parts would settle into their final position, possibly not all at the same time. When the whole figure has come to a stop in a definite attitude, this is called a held pose. Some of the animators thought they were getting too fuzzy, but that was only the beginning, as they saw new possibilities in the work they were doing. Number 3. The loose flesh on a figure, such as its cheeks, will move at a slower speed than the skeletal parts. This trailing behind in an action is sometimes called drag, and it gives a looseness and a solidity to the figure that is vital to the feeling of life. When done well, this technique is scarcely detectable as the film is projected. In effect, the animator is drawing in the fourth dimension, for he or she is depicting a figure the way it would be at only that precise moment. The drawings are not designed to be viewed by themselves, but only in a series projected at an established speed. Many comic actions have been based on this principle. As the fat on the running character drags farther and farther behind until the ultimate occurs, the skeleton runs off, leaving the flesh to fend for itself. This type of exaggeration will bring laughs in shorter films, but the chief value of this kind of follow through lies in its more subtle uses. Number 4. The way in which an action is completed often tells us more about the person than the drawings of the movement himself. A golfer takes a mighty swing which covers only a few frames, but what happens to him afterward can easily take 5 feet of film and is much more revealing. Whether he is graceful and slick in his follow through or wraps himself up in a knot. The anticipation sets up the action we expect, or is it the action the character expects? The action whizzes past, and now we come to the punchline of the gag, the follow through, which tells us what happened, how it all turned out. Obviously, the ending should be considered part of the entire action before any drawings are made. But amazingly, the ending was hardly ever developed in earlier animation. It was enough just to do the reach, the throw, the kick, and no thought was given to how much more entertaining the action itself could be, or what it could tell us about the character's personality. Fifth, Finally, there was the moving hold, which employed parts of all the other elements over overlapping action and follow through to achieve a few feeling of life and clarity. When a careful drawing had been made of a pose, it was held without movement on the screen for a few frames, at least 8, maybe as many as 16. This was to allow the audience time to absorb the attitude. That amounted to less than a second, but it was enough. However, when a drawing was held for that long, the flow of the action was broken. The illusion of dimension was lost, and the drawing began to look flat. A way had to be found to hold the drawing and still keep it moving. The answer was to make two drawings, one more extreme than the other, yet both containing all the elements of the pose. It was explained this way: you hit the pose, then drift on beyond to an even stronger pose. Everything goes further. The cheeks go up, the eyes fly out, the hands rise, he goes on his toes, his eyes open wider, but essentially he is still in his pose. Now they could use the follow through on the fleshy parts to give them the solidity and dimension. They could drag the parts to give the added feeling of weight and reality, and they could strengthen their poses for more vitality. It all added up to more life in the scene. The magic was beginning to appear. The sixth principle of animation is slow in and slow out. Once an animator had worked over his or her poses, the extremes, and redrawn them until they were the best they could be, they naturally wanted the audience to see them. They timed these key drawings to move quickly from one to the next, so that the bulk of the footage of the scene would be either on or close to these extremes. By putting the in-between close to each extreme and only one fleeting drawing halfway between, the animator achieved a very spirited result, with the characters zipping from one attitude to the next. This was called slow in and slow out, since that was the way the in-betweens were timed. Too much of this gave a mechanical feel to the action, robbing the scene of the very life that was being sought. But it was still an important discovery that became the basis of later refinements in timing and staging. They continued to analyze the actions more carefully and to understand how the body worked, since that was the only way to get the caricature of realism needed. Their work must have a foundation of fact in order to have sincerity. The most hilarious comedy is always based on actual things. Principle number 7: arcs. Very few living organisms are capable of moves that have a mechanical in and out or up and down precision. The action of a woodpecker might be an exception, and because of the restrictions of an external skeleton, there are undoubtedly some examples in the insect world. But the movements of most living creatures will follow a slightly circular path. The head seldom thrusts straight out, then back again. It lifts slightly or drops as it returns. Perhaps this has to do with the weight or maybe with the inner structure of the higher forms of life. But whatever the reason, most movements will describe an arc of some kind. The action of a hand gesture with a pointing finger follows circular path. The animator charts the position of his drawings along this arc. He makes his key drawings indicating where in between should be placed to keep the line of action on his arc. In betweens done without following this arc change the action radically. This discovery made a major change in the type of movements animators designed for their characters, breaking with the rigid and stiff actions that had gone before. In a walk, the characters had to pop up and down like the mechanical gadgets on an engine. Now they arced over at the top of their step and arced under the bottom position. A hit or a throw could be on a completely straight line, but the beginning of the action came sweeping in on an arc, and the follow-through started a corkscrew action. As this principle was better understood, scenes were plotted out with charts and dots, as well as rough poses to determine just how high and how low the character should go in any action. Arcs were stretched in as the key actions were planned, to guide the eventual drawings along this curved path. When the final drawings were being made, more ways would become apparent for the character to go even further in the action, especially using squash and stretch and overlapping action to good advantage. One of the major problems for the in-betweeners is that it is much more difficult to make a drawing on an arc than one halfway between the other two drawings. Even when the position has been indicated or a stern warning written on the extremes, watch arcs, there is a strong inclination to pull back towards a more normal in-between. It is only a series of drawings is rolled on the pegs that the proper location of the drawings become evident. No one has ever found a way of ensuring that the drawings will be all placed accurately on the arcs, even when experienced people are in-betweening the action. And it is one of the most basic requirements for the scene. Drawings made as straight in-betweens completely kill the essence of the action. Principle number 8, secondary action. Often the one idea being put over in a scene can be fortified by subsidiary action within the body. A sad figure wipes a tear as he turns away. Someone stunned shakes his head as he gets to his feet. A flustered person puts on his glasses as he regains his composure. When this extra business supports the main action, it is called secondary action and is always kept subordinate to the primary action. If it conflicts or becomes more interesting or dominating in any way, it is either a wrong choice or is staged improperly. The chief difficulty lies in making unified statement through the drawing and timing of separate but related parts. If the sad figure has an expression on his face that should be seen, the hand wiping the tear must be carefully placed to support that look. A broad, overwhelming gesture with the fist covering half the face would hardly be acceptable. Still, if the action is too subdued, it will be mushy, restricted, and inconsequential. If it is too strong, the face will never be seen. Should this secondary action be made to work with the features so that the expression is actually emphasized, the scene will be outstanding. Sometimes the secondary action will be the expression itself. Suppose there was to be a change from a painful hurt to a helpless, bleak look as the character turns away before he wipes his tear. The danger now is not that the expression will dominate the scene, but that it will never be seen. The change must come before the move or after and must be staged so that it is obvious, even though the secondary importance. A change in the middle of a major move will go unnoticed, and any value intended will be lost. One animator found the proper relationships among all these parts through a building block technique. First, he animated the most important move, making sure that it worked the way he wanted, communicating his thought in the strongest way. Then he went through the scene a second time, animating the secondary action, and even once more, if necessary, to make the rest of the drawings relate to these two actions. He continued to change and adjust until all parts of the drawing worked together in a very natural way. It is advisable in any case to try it all in thumbnails. Little exploratory search sketches before doing anything else, to make sure that everything will stage well and will look as convincing as the animator had hoped. When used correctly, secondary action will add richness to the scene, naturalness to the action, and a fuller dimension to the personality of the character. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for tuning in.
This is Auroville Radio, voices from the city of dawn.